Hello, and welcome to Opening Doors podcast. I'm excited to be here with you. This is episode 8. Hard to believe. It is exciting that the goal that I had is being achieved. And I owe that to my guests who have been so generous with their time and their honesty, sharing their stories. And to you, the people that are listening. It was really gratifying to me. I saw Jonathan Lewis at the Bucks County Reentry Coalition meeting last week. And he said, I just listened to the episode with Dr. Rada, and I really learned a lot. And I'm excited to be able to bring what I learned into my work. So I thought to myself, well, there you have it. It's worth it, me doing this podcast. People are going to be helped. This episode is a little bit of a review as we're kind of halfway through the season. I'm going to share a quote that was on the website of a future guest, Christy Smith, who is a criminology fellow with an organization called R Street, a research fellow. I'm getting her title wrong, but forgive me, Christy. The quote is this: the expectation that we can be immersed in suffering and loss daily and not be touched by it is as unrealistic as expecting to walk through water without getting wet. That was written by Rachel Naomi Raymond, and it was from Kitchen Table Wisdom, published in 1996. In 1992 to 1995, I was a high school teacher in the school district of Philadelphia. And I had a lot of students that were living in difficult circumstances. A lot of students that lived in the projects, students that had difficult home lives. I remember one time a student, they weren't in class, and they said, I left school early because I was really afraid that I was going to get rolled on by this group of kids, which means that this group of kids was going to beat him up. And so he missed class. I was like, yeah, okay, I get it. I'm cool with that. You need to protect yourself. Why I'm telling this story is because trauma, daily trauma, the quote, changes your brain. It changes the human brain. The fight or flight response becomes more hair trigger, so that when you are faced with a stressful situation, your brain doesn't take the time to say, is this a real threat? Or is this something that's really not that big of a deal? For a person that has gone through a lot of trauma in their lives, it's all a big deal, whether it is or isn't. And research has shown that you as an individual, the person whose trauma response and stress response has become more hair trigger, you don't really have control over that. When your cortisol spikes and you are in that fight or flight mode, your ability to reason is out the window. It's act or run, right? And I'm bringing this up because so many young people, so many kids that are exposed on the daily to traumatic situations have this hair trigger fight or flight response. And that is a cause of a lot of crimes, a lot of incidences that happen with kids, and especially kids that are in the inner city, or kids that come from difficult circumstances. Maybe their socioeconomic barriers, their parents might be on drugs, like me. These kids make some bad decisions sometimes. And those bad decisions end up putting them into the justice system. Today, I want to talk a little bit about the juvenile justice system and the changes that I believe are imperative The idea of a school to prison pipeline for men of color in this country, it's not just an idea, it's a reality. And in some ways, it started in the 80s with the mandatory minimum sentencing guidelines that were introduced when America got tough on crime. It was around the crack epidemic and the AIDS epidemic, where a lot of people were dying from drug use. A lot of people were getting AIDS from using needles, whether they were homosexual or heterosexual. And so there was a generation of kids who were growing up without parents, without both parents. Maybe they were being raised by grandparents or aunts and uncles, kinship family situations. And a lot of these kids cut school, got in trouble. You know, we've heard from some of them. We heard from two gentlemen who didn't have broken homes and got involved with criminal activity just because of the neighborhoods that they grew up in. My issue with this is the idea of a whole generation of mostly men of color and women of color that were put in jail with really long sentences, some life without parole. This has created a bloated prison industrial complex. We live in a country, the United States of America, and I am a proud American, but we live in a country where there are more prisons being built in this country than there are schools being built. I see that as a big problem that needs to change. I understand that when somebody commits a crime, there's a victim involved and there's a victim's family. And if somebody shot my son, I would definitely want that person to pay for their crime. But as a mother, and knowing that the person that shot my son also has a mother, life without parole for a teenager is patently wrong. Fortunately, Montgomery versus Louisiana put that into law that juveniles could not be sentenced to life without parole because the juvenile brain, the young person's brain, is not developed. We heard from Star Granger, who was released from her sentence because of that precedent. We'll hear from other guests coming up that were able to get out of jail after decades because of that precedent. But it's not enough. The idea of a mandatory minimum for a crime means that judges can't be judges. They can't say there are extenuating circumstances here. This person probably needs therapy and or a behavioral kind of a sentence, not imprisonment. Not when there's a mandatory sentence. I believe that it's really important for people to understand that while imprisonment for a crime in many cases is absolutely necessary, there are other options. That is part of why I am going to be speaking with Judge Rhea Boylan of Bucks County, who was one of the founders of Recovery Court and Wellness Court. Recovery Court was formerly known as Drug Court, and Wellness Court was formerly known as Mental Health Court. And what those courts allow is for somebody that has committed a crime to be offered the alternative of getting treatment instead of being sentenced to prison. So if they go through a treatment program, they will have, served their time. And the exciting thing about Recovery and Wellness Court is that the recidivism rate is so much lower that people that have gone through those programs tend to be able to have a productive life afterwards and get away from their criminal activities. I'm excited for the upcoming guests that I'm going to have the privilege to interview on Opening Doors. And I so appreciate you sticking with me and listening and sharing this podcast, because these stories need to be heard so that people can understand the system that is happening, that is going on in our country, and can then vote and or contact their congresspeople, their senators, their state representatives, encourage them to make meaningful change to the justice system, because we've got to do better in this country. We are the greatest country, with so many amazing freedoms and amazing rights that are afforded to us by the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. Very sadly, a lot of those rights have been parsed out based on skin color, based on socioeconomic background. And I'm hopeful that the information that is shared by my guests is meaningful to you, and meaningful enough that you will take action. So this is my call to action for you, my listeners. Reach out to your legislative officers, the people that run the county, the people that are your state senators and representatives, and the federal senators and congresspeople, and implore them to consider alternatives to incarceration, such as mental health treatment or addiction treatment. Implore them to make sure that somebody that has a disability, a cognitive disability or an emotional disability, is not thrown in jail, but is given treatment. We must break the school to prison pipeline. We must start building more schools that are equitably financed, and get these private prison owners and the people that are producing all the uniforms and the getting free labor, get them out. Enough is enough. Enough is enough. America cannot be known as the country with the most incarcerated people. We are supposed to be the land of the free, not the land of the locked up. I'm sitting here with all my white privilege, and I'm not trying to be a freaking white savior. I'm trying to speak the truth. And I hope you will join me and speak truth to power and vote and reach out, because only we, the people, when we rise up, can we make change happen. Let's be the change we want to see in the world. Stay safe, stay kind, stay caring. Thank you so much for listening.